the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain.
Why can't people leap over walls, generally speaking? Let's just say the wall's this high. I mean, like, it's plausible that you could actually leap it. Why wouldn't you be able to? Don't think you can, okay? I mean, yeah, you might physically, you just don't have the ability, the capability. I mean, you're what? The wall's still taller than you. You eat too much? Didn't take long to talk about food, did it? We're going to finish out our series, Happily Ever After, today. So I told you Easter is really about you. At the end of the day, it's about it's a reflection of what's going to take place in your life. And over these past couple of weeks, I've challenged you in a sense of, do you truly believe that what you saw on the cross and what you saw come out of that tomb, or what you imagine, I guess we could say, you didn't really see it, if you imagined Christ on the cross, and you imagine an empty tomb, and he's alive, and well, he rose from the dead. Do you believe that this will take place in your life? That you have been crucified already with him, and one day you will rise much like he has risen. And I've pushed you on this. Do you believe this? Because that word belief, we have multiple ways of using that word belief, from convictions to trust, right? I mean, you could be convicted of something to be true, and that's a belief. You could also believe in someone, and what you mean to say is you trust them. And what I'm driving at is, are you convicted deep within that what took place a couple thousand years ago that we call Easter is a reflection of what will happen to you? It needs to become a conviction. You can't force it to become a conviction, but you can open your mind to the possibility that what you're hearing is true, and then ask God for some experiences of love from him to cement what you are hearing to be true. Guys, because this is what I'm driving at. Psalm 18 is as Sarah was saying, it's a metaphor, it's an image of, you could say, your spiritual life. That you truly can leap walls. Or as Isaiah 40 puts it, mount up with wings as eagles and fly. You could run and not be weary. But to know that, and to believe that needs to be a conviction within you. So today we're going to talk about some very, if you're tuned in, which I get how it's easy to not be tuned in, especially when we go deep. If you're tuned in, what we're talking about is your spiritual life, but that word spiritual is not to belittle it. Your spiritual life is your true life. This this body, and I feel like I'm a broken record. I mean, week after week after week, this body is as Paul puts it, is a mere kernel of the life inside. Oh, death, where did you go? Is how I titled this, because Paul paints a picture of your beliefs or your views of death that just, they don't bother you. You truly, death does not have any weight over you. When the perishable puts on, so Paul just got done. We're going to jump right into this. Paul just got done saying, at the last sound of the trumpet, the last trumpet, in the twinkling of an eye, in the moment of time, you will change. You won't even be able to recognize the transformation, and it's going to happen so quick. You will change from perishable to imperishable, mortal to immortal. The twinkling of an eye, it's going to happen that quick. I've got a feeling, though, given what I see in Jesus and what we learned about him after the grave, you may not even recognize the difference at first. Outside of, you will not be weighed down with sin. And when I say sin, the whole realm of sin. But you will very well be dressed back in skin, be able to eat, experience emotions, but it will all be right. So now we get to this, all right? In the twinkling of an eye, you will change imperishable to perishable. And when the perishable puts on the imperishable, and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. That comes from Isaiah. I kind of want to call him out on that, because when I go 6 feet under, I feel like it's the end of the road for me. So, death one day will be swallowed up in victory. I mean, it almost sounds like an oxymoron. Oh, death is swallowed up in victory. How can someone who's dead be victorious over being in that state of death? Because when I die, and when you die, if we get to that point, and the Lord doesn't come back, I'm pretty much sure I will be helpless over my state of being dead. So it's just death is swallowed up in victory. By the way, being from Isaiah, and this prophecy hasn't been fully fulfilled. The prophecy about you. By the way, when do we put on the imperishable? And when do we put on the immortal? When does this take place? Are we just kind of waiting around for it? It's a question we're going to ask. Death, where is your victory? Oh, death, where is your sting? That word, that's from Hosea. So Paul's tapped into two Old Testament sources here, two prophets, to tell you that the Old Testament, these prophets were talking about you today. And we are still waiting the complete fulfillment of this. Oh, death, where is your sting? That word sting is what we're going to hone in on. And that means, it's like a wasp sting. It's like the piercing, the piercing pain of being stung. Death, where is your sting? It doesn't, just look at the structure of those words. It doesn't seem to make sense. I mean, if you're dead, then how's it going to hurt you? Where's the sting of death if you're dead? Unless this is a sting you can feel right now. Unless this is a sting that happens today. And I know, right? When Jesus comes back, it's all taken care of, right? There's no more death, so there'll be no more sting. But there's a little bit more to this. It's just another day at church, though, right? Gonna sit here, we're gonna get through this sermon, and we'll get home and get back to our stuff. We're gonna go deeper today than normal. I feel like where we're gonna go today, I haven't been able to go in a while, partly just because of the way Scripture has been laid out. But I find today's talk fascinating. But here you are at church. Let's just get through this, and we'll get to our hot dogs, and we'll get home and get back to our life. So what's the point of being here? And what's the point of being here if it's a challenge for me? I'm speaking as if I'm you. If it's a challenge for me to to stay locked in, if it's a challenge for me to follow along, I mean, what is the point of being here? And, well, you have very little to no point if you see life as being as a fight for survival for yourself, life is something that is designed for you to protect, and life is something that's designed for you to love. If you don't see your life as being important to the lives of those around, you probably have very little reason to be here outside of the fact that this life will soon end. I know, Gene, we talk about death all the time, but the day's going to come and then eternity is in front of us, and you could say, hey, I've been prepped for this. I actually came to believe that this life today was going to end, and lo and behold, it has for everybody so far, and new life came, and so reality is you're here because you believe there's actually life after death, and you want to hope in it. But there's people in your life, they don't even care to think about it. But death will sneak up on them like a thief in the night. And death will sneak up on their loved ones, the ones they care about. And so I see it today. Yeah, I mean, we're preaching, not really much application, so to speak. Outside of the fact is you are storing away knowledge of truth that will be useful not only to you, but to those around. You see, God's put people in your life. People that, He's put on your heart to love, to care for, to struggle with, to stay up at night praying for, and to go through pain and agony because you care about them. And so we're walking through the truth of what life is really about. And I do it week after week in hopes that you take it home and you're ready for the questions when they do come. If they come. Look, life would be really awesome if everyone flocked to us. Tell us about Jesus, please. Tell us what you know about God. I mean, that's really that would be awesome. Not really. Christians are being whacked across the world. And they're being taken out at rates that, we haven't seen in a long time. Which is good in a way because now it magnifies the gospel. It brings to center stage what you believe. And it's going to challenge you. Are you truly convicted of what you know to be true? And it's going to put some fire to you. And not fire like, will you stand by this in the hard time? But fire as in like purging those false beliefs. So, okay, why do I got this image up here? I almost forgot I had this up here. So, why are you here today? I started jogging again. And when you take off 6 months of jogging, my daughter keeps calling me fat. And I'm sick of it. So I've got to do something about it. I've tried changing the diet. That doesn't work as fast as I'd like, so I insert some jogging. And so I decide, we've got zoo passes yesterday, and I found a path through the woods, linear park, that connects basically my house to the zoo. And so Becca dropped me off at the mouth of the path, and I will jog to the zoo and meet you there, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's only 3 miles, and it's not a big deal. And I can jog walk, right? It's in the woods, no one's watching. I mean, jog walk, right? That's when you jog and then walk when no one's looking because you can't make it any further. And then you start thinking to yourself, I'm a warrior. I can jog this out. And you jog again. So I jog walk. But I jogged for 2 miles and then started jog walking. And as I'm jog walking, if I saw someone, this is what you do. You probably do this. I'm just going to call you out because this is what I do. If you see someone, you cannot transition from a jog into a walk when someone's watching. Because it just takes a stab at your pride. I mean, you just can't do that. You got to continue jogging. But you can transition from a walk into a jog because at that point you're becoming the warrior that you know you are. But so when you're jogging on a trail and you see someone, you have to continue jogging, or else you're gonna take a stab at your pride. And so I'm jogging and I'm getting ready to transition into a walk, and I come around a corner and I'm mentally already okay. I'm gonna walk this one out. The body's just shutting down, And there's a lady about 100 yards up, and I just catch her. Oh, I can't walk. I got to jog it out until I pass her. And it's middle of the afternoon. There's no clouds around, and I'm jogging. I'm dying. I'm just like, get behind me. And this woman starts to talk to me. You don't do this when you're coming up on a jogger who's about to pass out. All I got on the first part was impressive. It is hot outside. As I'm passing, I've got a split second to interpret what she said. And so I said, yes, I am. Thank you. I thought I was agreeing with her that it's hot out and I'm really hot. And I just kept jogging. And so after the corner went and I come down to my walk, I got to slow my mind down and say, what did she really say? And I realized what she said was, you're impressive. It's hot out. And I said to her, yes, I am. Thank you. And my first response was, man, I'm arrogant. The second response was, that's pretty funny. This is why you're here, because the world throws you information that is polluted with truth, and you are here to receive what is true so that one day down the road, when life hits, you slow down and say, that is what it means. This is what life is about. You know, in the midst of your jog, in the midst of your pain, all right, you hear these words about happily ever after, life after death, the resurrection, I will be resurrected. And it's like catching her words as you're jogging by in the pain, and you can't fully process it. But you come back week after week to be fed what is true so that one day when you have a moment to yourself and the Lord allows, you can decipher what is true and begin to interpret. A question I want to ask you, when you may not know, but some of you may have a season in your life that you recall that you began to actually fear death. When did you begin to fear death? And I remember several years ago for me, there was a season of life where death, the idea of death just overcame me, and I was very anxious almost all the time because death's just so heavy. I just never faced death in the eyes in a sense. And, you may have that season in your life that, you've started thinking about death. And question is, what brought you to that season? Why did you start to fear death? Or why did you start to even think about death? Well, probably you encountered death in a way that you weren't really meant to encounter. Maybe a premature death of a friend, or you went to a memorial, or you read a news story on how some children died, or there was something that shocked your system to get you thinking about it. Maybe a loved one died or something, and you began to think about death in a manner that really you weren't ready to think about it from that perspective. And death began to sting. Death began to have this weight upon your shoulders. It began to be a burden, but it also began to hurt. I mean, I remember during my season of it, and I can't say I'm fully liberated from it. There are moments where the idea of dying still kind of, it stops me in my tracks. But, it's in these moments that you really, your hope in the Lord will begin to be what either anchors you through it, or if you lack the hope, you'll what was James put it? Like the wave of a sea, just tossed to and fro. You see, the people around you, they don't know. They may not know what you know. And so we're going to take the time and understand, what is the sting of death? Hold on. He says it right there, the sting of death is sin. What does that mean? Well, I mean, just stop, and this is the stuff that I actually enjoy diving into. What does it mean that the sting of death is sin? It's easy to let your mind automatically begin to be like, sin brought in death, and therefore that's the sting of death. But it seems as if the sting of death is an active thing right now. And that word sting, I looked it up in the Greek just to make sure it was used right. It does mean like a sting of a bug, a scorpion, or something like that. Something you live through, but you experience pain and discomfort, a piercing of some sort. The sting of death is sin. Well, define what is sin. And sin, we often define sin by our sin behaviors, but that's not sin. Our behaviors of sin is not sin. Sin is a lifestyle. Sin is I can't call it a worldview because it is a world in and of itself. Sin, when you see the word sin, you basically are seeing a life without God. Let's split this room in half. Boy, one of you are going to be in the sin aisle and one of you are going to be in the, let's just split it in half. This side represents sin. You got to pretend this side doesn't even exist. All you know is a life without God. There's no right or wrong. There's no knowledge of good and evil. It's just unrighteous. But if you didn't know God or right from wrong, sin would seem normal. Right? I live to protect myself. I live to love myself, to worship myself. And if there was no God, there was no right, there was no righteousness, this is all you knew, then would there be anything wrong to it? Well, no. But the thing about sin is we do have a world of righteousness. We do have our second life, a life, the Spirit of God within us, which actually, gives power to sin. And this is what begins to fascinate me, is that the mere presence of God, the presence of God being the law, the command, the nature of God written on paper, begins to give power to sin. Which the more power sin has, the more sting death has. So how do you put all this together? I thought if you insert God into the equation, then everything becomes good. But Paul's laying something out here that seems like an odd connection. That where there is the law, that is, let's be very clear, the 10 Commandments. We also got the Mosaic Law, the Levitical laws, but the 10 Commandments. Where there are the 10 Commandments, they're written upon your heart. It's in you. You can't separate yourself from it. Where there is the law, there is power to sin. And where there is sin, there is the sting to death. So to get rid of the sting of death, you have to abolish the law. But you just want to understand this. I want to understand how does it all work together? So you start by understanding what is sin. It's a world of unrighteousness. Professional liars. Anyone here professional liar? I'm not. Or I am. You won't know because I'm a professional at it. A professional liar, my guess, because I'm a human, aims for a couple things. One, to flatter you, to win you over in their eyes. Two, to win your trust. So they give you a bunch of truths. And then three, when your guard is down, deceive you. But that deception always has an element of truth to it. This is where the power of lying and deception comes, is that there's always an element of truth to lies. This is what makes lies so, they slide right in. When you see the word sin, essentially it's misinformation. It's essentially a world of deception. But what makes it so powerful is that it's cloaked oftentimes in truth. The power of sin is the law. So, let me go here. I want to go to Romans 7. Romans 7 unwinds this a little bit more. That which is good then bring death to me. He's talking about the law. That which is good then bring death to me. By no means. It was sin producing death in me through what is good. sin is, you just slow down and you begin to understand the inner workings of the spirit, the soul, and how your two fleshes are at war within each other. Sin producing death in me through what is good, which is, he's referring to the law. In order that sin might be shown to be sin. And there's the clue right there. This is where it begins to make sense. Through the commandment, sin might become sinful beyond measure. I thought the goal is to minimize our sin, to present ourselves as clean and as pure as possible. But you can't do this. And you might need to change your approach in evangelizing and let people become sinful beyond measure in your presence. You may need to let them breathe and let them be organically what they want to be instead of suppressing behavior, because it's when through the commandment might become sinful beyond measure. It's at that point you can then begin to see the unrighteousness in contrast to the righteousness. You see, so what Paul's saying here is that you don't know black is black until you put white behind it. So without the law, you have no white. Sin just blends into everything. And so the law, what is good, it gives contrast to what is evil, and therefore causes evil to stand out. But how does that give power to sin? Simple. Google your cough. Google, I've been coughing for 3 days, and take the third headline. I didn't try this. My assumption, though. You take the third link that comes up. Somewhere in that link will be a possible cancer diagnosis. If you've been coughing for 3 days, Google, I have a cough, what's wrong with me? And somewhere in your search, you will run across the fact that you might have stage 5 lymphoma cancer. And if you are normal, just being alerted to the possibility of having cancer will drop a seed into your mind. And you will begin to be dominated by thoughts of cancer. So much so, you go to the doctor because your cough's not getting better and you are overly concerned about the fact that you possibly have only a couple weeks left to live. And you go to your doctor and you say, Doc, you can't tell your doctor you Googled it. It just doesn't work, right? He laughs you out. You just say, Doc, I've been really researching my issues. I've read, I've gone to some scientists and some doctors and whatnot, and it's probable that I have stage 5 lymphoma. I'm sure you're going to find this to be true here real soon. I've already, I'm okay with dying, even though I'm not, but he goes, all right, hold on. Pulls out his scope, listens, breathe. He goes, no, you got bronchitis. He goes, no, that's not possible. I don't have bronchitis. I've cancer. You see what's happened is that you gave power to a lie. Now, I've brought this to an extreme level, but I'm sure to some extent you've all dabbled in Google diagnoses and have experienced giving power to a lie and how it affects your mind. Guys, it will destroy your day. And you just have a cold. But so much so the doctor says, I'm going to give you bronchitis medication. Stay on it 3 days. I will prove to you you don't have cancer. Day 2, you still got a cough. No, I'm going to die. I've got cancer. It's not kicking in. I should be better by now. Day 3, it won't be until like 7 days later you actually realize, I don't have a cough. Maybe he was right. But maybe I still have cancer. It's incredible how a lie can overcome you and have so much power to control your life. And this is what the law exposes the power of sin. Let me walk you through this a little bit more here in a second. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. The victory of what? I got to speed this up, actually. All right. The victory what? The victory to leap over walls. The victory to mount up with wings and fly like eagle. The victory to overcome. The victory to say, screw you, death. I don't care about you. Come take me. This ain't my life. You would expedite my trip to the heavens. Therefore, my beloved brothers, be steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Now, see, look, that's what a transition. Typically, you throw an illustration in and you ease people into a transition. We just got done talking about perishing and imperishing and corruptible, incorruptible. And then he says, hey, get to work. There's no breath in between. And if you just skim over this, you're kind of like, what are you talking about? But knowing myself, knowing, just our nature, we just skim right through it and get to the next chapter without stopping and saying, why the sudden change? Why the sudden change? Well, let's talk about the labor real quick. What is the labor? Yes, I put a tractor in there because I like tractors. What is the labor? What are you working for? What is this work that about? Be steadfast, be immovable. Don't let the idea of death shake you. Stop quivering. Stop freaking out. Stop being afraid. Abound in the work of the Lord. Know that your work is not in vain. Know that your labor is not worthless. Holy smokes. Have you ever done anything for Jesus? And be like, why did I do that? That was a waste of time. That was a waste of energy. That was a waste of my resources because I saw nothing in return. I only gave of myself, gave of my family, gave of my money, and here I am, and everybody went back home to do what they like to do in their sinful flesh. What is the labor? Well, let's use Paul's words to define the labor, because there's a lot of things that talk about work in Scripture, but what Paul defines the labor just in the same letter, he who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. So we're planting and watering what? Each other. We are God's fellow workers, and you are God's field. You are a worker and a field. A worker and a field. How's that possible? You are a worker and a field. Remember what he said. This is a bare kernel. This body is just a mere kernel. It has to die. These bodies are the field, and the worker is inside. We are fields, and we are workers. And then he used the word God's building. This is what we are building up. The place where God himself will dwell. So then what is the labor? All right, so I see you, or you see me, and there is a vision that I should have for your life that I set myself out to achieve. John 6, Jesus explains what it is that we are working towards. He says, what is the work of God? They said to him, the disciples say to him, what must we do to be doing the works of God? So this should be my concern for your life. If I am to have a concern for your life, what he says next is what I should aim for. Everything I do, and I say I'm still talking like as if I'm you, but like everything I'm doing in preaching should have this goal in mind. Whatever he says next, because this is what you will labor to do. This is what I want you working at. John 6:29, Jesus answered, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he sent. That is what we should strive for each other. That is what we are aiming for. That is what we wake up in the morning praying, God, may my brothers, may my family, may my friends, may they believe in you. And then I go to work. We call it work because you know very well how much it can hurt as you long to see your family, your friends, the ones you love, come into a belief in the Lord that changes their life. But your work isn't changing their sinful behavior. Your work isn't changing their lifestyle. It might be part of the work. It may be part of getting to the end result, but your goal, the harvest at the end of the day, is this person lives in utter trust. Regardless of their life situation, regardless of where they're at and what they're struggling with, my goal for you, the end of my message today, is that you believe a little more. That I give you the truth of what God says, and you go home and you experience it to be true, and it forms convictions deep within. So that you can stay steadfast and immovable in your work, because you have people in your life that you love, that you care about, that require a lot of work in order to show them that this belief in the Lord is not in vain. Let me back up to my question real quick. How do we get to the point of overcoming the fear of death? You know, every one of those headstones represents a body in the ground. How do you get to the point of overcoming the fear of death? Because look, this is Paul saying you've got to get beyond this to abound in your work. You've got to get beyond fearing death and death in itself to abound and be steadfast and immovable. How do you get to that point? Well, let's first ask, how did you get to that point? Because my 1-year-old doesn't fear death. My 7-year-old watched Walker, Texas Ranger with me last night, and for the first time ever said, I'm afraid of the boogeyman. Is there monsters in my house? I said, don't worry, the eyes of the ranger are upon you. The awesome show. He's 79 years old. He was in his 60s when he did that show. I could barely jog 2 miles without people looking. How did we become fearful of death? I mean, so if we can figure out how we became fearful of death, maybe we can undo it. Well, you learned about it. You were taught it. Man, how high up do you think she is? From that picture, it looks like she's maybe 100 feet up. She's probably like 6 inches off the ground. But it gives you the view that she's way off the ground. I had a guy walk up to me and Becca. We were outside the gym, because going in the gym means you have to work out. So we were walking outside the gym with Connor, our 1-year-old, and he was walking in between us, and this guy comes up, and Connor, of course, just waves at him. Oh, man. Broke the ice, Connor. Now we're going to have to have a conversation. And the guy walks up and goes, did you know there's this kid riding his bike on the fence? And it caught me off guard. Riding his bike on the fence. He goes, yeah, he's just riding back and forth, having a good old time. And then some guy came up to him and explained gravity, and he fell. Man, that's perfect. But I got to put in my terms, right? You got the girl on the balance beam who's perfect at it. She just jumps up and she's enjoying it. She's enjoying the balance beam and what she's natural at. And then the coach decides to have a lesson on gravity and how you fall and how that could hurt. And we don't want to fall off the balance beam, but we got medics over there to make sure if you do fall, you're going to be taken care of. And that point forward, she was no longer perfect. She kept falling. The knowledge of gravity upset her flow. And this is where the fear of death comes in. You came to know it. You came to know death in a way you weren't designed to know it. Was death the curse? I don't think it was. Death was the release from the curse. The curse was the work and the pain and the labor of life. What did he say? He said, man, once you eat of that fruit, you have to die. I don't see it as a curse. I see it as the liberation from the curse. That death was there to set you free, ultimately, to live the life you were designed to live. Death was brought in by sin. But sin gives, now death has a sting to it because of sin. Because of the deception of what death is. But sin has a sting because we know the law. Right from wrong. So Christ gave us victory by abolishing the law, which removes sin completely. And so now we have to be retrained about what death is about. Back 1 Corinthians 15:54, when the perishable puts on the imperishable. So this is the question. How did we become fearful of death? Well, we became aware that we were perishable, that we have throwaway bodies. When the perishable puts on the imperishable and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. So, you have to start over. Everyone who is born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that overcomes the world, our faith. It's a new way of thinking, folks. It's a new way of approaching life. Everything in life. 2 steps. Be born again. You can't do that, by the way. The Lord does that. But you can believe in the Lord. And you can confess that there's a part of you that wants to live in a realm of sin that's just not right. So I'm going to begin today challenging my thinking, capturing every thought, renewing the mind. I am going to see this world the way it ought to be seen. I want to say good luck because this is your labor. Entering into his rest, entering into that faith. With all the information flowing around you, with all the deception that's cloaked in truth, I want to say good luck, but I don't have to because I know the Spirit of God is within you. But I encourage you, don't just go home and float with the wind. Be intentional. I don't need to feed you this stuff. You can dig up the truth and you can learn it for yourself. Hopefully I spur you on to that. You can challenge my words and my teaching against the Word of God and come up to your own conclusion. But ultimately, you have to retrain your thinking. As a young child, the mind is a blank slate, so is yours as a child of God. Time to fill it up with the truth. Renew your thinking. Your mind is full of lies and deceits from the world that are cloaked in truth. The only way to get there is to saturate your mind with what is true. And we close out the series Happily Ever After. I've come to a point in life. I've wandered through a very long season of being very fearful of death. This series means a lot to me because I truly to my core feared death. And there came a point in this season that I said, I can't live my life afraid of dying anymore. And during that time, I was meeting with an elderly man who did have cancer, whose days were numbered. And I was able to watch him, and this didn't help my fear of death at first, but I watched him as he progressed through his cancer and came closer and closer. And at first, his words were, Greg, I'm afraid of dying. I mean, I get that, man. I think that fear is the process of dying. I get the process of this body finally just saying enough. And as I watched him progress, my emotions kind of morphed into his, where about maybe halfway through this season of him dying, he started saying things like, Greg, I've come to know one thing to be true. God's true, and I should just love people. At the end of the day, at 80 years old, nothing else matters. The guy's been to seminary, has led seminaries. I mean, he was in the religious circles. And he concluded at the end of the day, God is true. He believed the Bible. And he could do one thing over, just love people. You know, and then the last time I met with him was about a week before he died. And it was interesting because he said, Greg, I'm ready to go. I'm just ready to go. He came to that point of knowing there was life after death, and he hoped in it. But he had the privilege of his body saying, enough's enough, I'm done. Time to put it to rest. And seeing him through that season actually worked me out of my fear, as hard as it was to see a friend pass away. Because that image will always be burned in my mind. Can I get to where he was the last time I met him? You can. Paul's telling you about it. He's telling you this life will fade away. It's not meant to live forever. You don't want it to. Death is not a curse, but there's a sting to death that sin has brought in. That we can alleviate the sting by knowing what is true. You are God's house. You are his building. And in you is real life, the life of the Spirit of God himself. These are mere kernels of life that have to be sown so that what is true and what is real can be revealed one day. And don't doubt it for a minute. In a twinkling of an eye, you will be changed. And your glory will resemble the glory of the Son of God. And death will be swallowed up in victory forever.